So Bernie Sanders marched with Martin Luther King. Not only did he march with Martin Luther King, Bernie Sanders, at one point, there's photographs of him being chained to a black woman and essentially carried away by the cops. He has been right on the issue of civil rights his entire life. There was no point in which he had to evolve. He was right on the issue from jump. Even from the standpoint of LGBT issues. I mean, you have him in the well of the Senate when it wasn't safe, meaning when it wasn't the prevailing opinion, arguing for a gay soldier after being smeared or being attacked by a bigoted congressman. He's been right on civil rights. He was not able to attend the LGBT forum, town hall that was taking place by CNN. However, I would argue that his life and his correctness on this, for the most part, can stand as a testament without him having to be there at that particular showpiece. Elizabeth Warren was there. And despite getting a lot of press from one answer, which I also want to talk about because that wasn't exactly what it seemed to be, or that one has a bit of controversy around it, and I'll explain. But some of her other answers are outright troubling. And no one ever, it doesn't matter whether it's Emma, it doesn't matter whether it's Chris Hayes, no one ever gives this woman a follow-up. And same thing with CNN, no follow-up. She says things that are outright troubling, especially from the standpoint of running on the left. No follow-up. And the only thing that they talk about is the one showpiece viral video that was essentially just planned answer. Welcome to the soapbox. Let's talk about the LGBT forum and Elizabeth Warren's performance at that forum. That again, I would make the point that some of the answers were troubling is too strong. Didn't make. No. I'll stay with troubling. Let's be provocative. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Soapbox After Dark. Guys, if you dig this content, like, share, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal Patreon. This content is brought to you by you because they demonetize this content, which is from jump at this point. Elizabeth Warren, LGBT Forum, CNN. Now, CNN, kind of like MSNBC, has been fawning over Warren. And so I guess it's too much for me to hope, wonder, wish that they can give her a follow-up when she says things that are just weird or just basically untrue. Or in some cases, just deserve a follow-up just to pry into her thinking on the matter. Let's go to the first one. So, I gotta be honest, it's taken everything in me not to call this man Fredo, but I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be a better person. Elizabeth Warren is asked, let's see. Right. All right, listen to this. Listen to this question. Awesome question.
Was there ever a time that you felt differently about...
Was there ever a time you felt differently about the LGBT issue? That's what he's trying to say. If you can get it out. Come on.
This issue in particular about same-sex marriage?
No, I don't think so. I actually don't remember it. I mean, it may have been the case. I don't have notes from when I was a little kid.
Republican by party for many years. Yeah. Was there...
You've been a Republican by party for many years. Was there ever a time where... Jesus Christ.
Ever a time that you felt differently about this issue in particular, about same-sex marriage?
No, I don't think so. I actually don't remember it. I mean, it may have been the case. I don't have notes from when I was a little kid.
Now, think about what she's saying. Now, even if you're a Warren supporter and you just so happen you're on this channel because you don't think Warren is a horrible candidate, and so you go with this notion that, all right, these guys aren't necessarily one-to-one, but she's enough of whatever that I need that I'll vote for. You know, Warren was a Republican up until she was in her 40s. You know, Warren was a Republican up until she was in her 40s. Is it possible that she was one of those lefty Republicans that were okay with this particular issue? But she said, I don't have notes from when I was a kid. It wasn't a kid when she was Republican. She was a Republican up until the age of 40. The way she answered the question is in and of itself dishonest, because Warren knows she was a Republican up until that time. Come on. Now, what Chris Cuomo should have said here was, well, wait a minute. It wasn't when you were a kid. You were a Republican when you were up until your 30s or 40s. Are you saying that you didn't hold those views at that age? And why did you take this to this notion that you were a kid? Were you trying to mislead the audience into believing that at some point, maybe as a child, you held these views? They never ask follow-up. I never get the follow-up that I want. And by the way, they hound Tulsi Gabbard like nobody's business on this. You would hear like Michael Brooks and Sam Cedar bring up, oh, Tulsi Gabbard and her dad was anti-gay when they were being raised and as a kid. They give her a pass on this entirely. They don't bring it up at all. When people make the point that this seems a bit racial or at the very least a certain degree of bigotry, it's for stuff like this. How does Warren get a pass on this? It's very possible that Warren did hold certain views that other Republicans had, especially on the issue of gay marriage. That wouldn't be out of kilter at all since she was a Republican. Why does she get a pass on this? But Tulsi Gabbard doesn't. It's a smear they hit her with all the time, but Warren, it's okay that she evolved. That's amazing. That's amazing. But that's true. That's true. The Native American candidate gets a pass on evolving. All right, so here's another one, and this one is cringeworthy, especially, again, from the standpoint of the left. And again, no follow-up.
That's good.
And I heard that, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, the logic for one demands the logic for the other. Let's take a listen.
You also have to protect them as what they are. Do you think that a crime against somebody who is transgender should be punished as a hate crime in statute?
You know, I think we could, if we think that's going to be the most effective way to make change. So I'm open to this. But I'll tell you what I really want. I want to
No follow-up. She has a way of not answering questions. And it's always aggravating to me as somebody who's listening to it and just say, well, wait a minute, she didn't answer that question. And I can show you multiple cases of this. In fact, I will show you multiple cases of this. But that's not an answer. I mean, ultimately, she said, we're open to this, which is essentially what she gets around to. And then she moves on to take control of what is being said because she's uncomfortable with the way that the question has been asked of her. If you know what I mean. Listen to this again. Just listen to her for yourself. And she does this pattern in multiple instances. And I can show you other cases. Listen to this.
Also have to protect them as what they are. Do you think that a crime against somebody who is transgender should be punished as a hate crime in statute?
You know, I think we could, if we think that's going to be the most effective way to make change.
I think we could, if we think that's the most. That's not anything. It's like saying, hey, should we give people $1,000? I think we should, if we think that will be the most effective way for doing whatever. That's not an answer. That's nothing. Let's let her get around to it. I mean, because you could say that about anything. I think we should do that if we think that's the most effective way of doing whatever. That's such a non-answer. And then she takes control of the interview at that point and moves on to something else that she's more comfortable talking about. Listen to her. Let her finish.
So I'm open to this. But I'll tell you what I really want.
And now she's taking control and moving on to something else. Now, if Elizabeth Warren had a black ancestor, would Elizabeth Warren call herself an African American? Isn't that a fascinating question? Like, and would people accept her as an African American? And if not, then why should they accept her as a Native American? I find that question to be amazing. Elizabeth Warren, in this case, is being asked, look, should transgender people be accepted in statute into hate crime laws? Now, my perspective of this is, well, wait a minute. If that's the same question, should African Americans be accepted in the hate crime laws? Well, people would say, well, yeah. I mean, some people, if my point is this. If African Americans are accepted for hate crime laws, then doesn't that just kind of necessitate the other? Like, the logic of itself is made just by the first premise. Meaning, you would think that the hate crime laws are there in order to protect a certain minority against the majority. Well, the minority in this case, you could say is African Americans, you can say Hispanics, you can say immigrants. And the moment that you add those demographics into the mix, I don't understand why not transgender. They are a minority, a significant minority. They are subject to hate. That is absolutely true. I don't think anybody would disagree with any of those. I know some people would disagree with the premise of hate crime laws, but I'm just saying, if you agree with the premise of it, which I suspect Elizabeth Warren does, how do you agree with the premise for one group that may be subject to hate or has a history of being subjected to hate, but not another group that is also a minority that is also subjected to hate? Maybe not a racial minority, but in this case, the issue is not race. The issue is sex in this case. I hope you understand, or gender identification. I don't understand her openness. It sounds like the answer to this should just be yes. What am I missing? This answer seems to be problematic, especially from the standpoint of the left. I don't understand, and it seems like Cuomo would stop and say, well, wait a minute. If African Americans or other groups that are minorities that are subjected to hate crimes are in the hate crime statute, why not transgender? It seems like they hit the same boxes when the first premise necessitate the second. And ask her to explain. Like, that just seems to be the most natural pushback to whatever Elizabeth Warren is trying to take this interview off into. I don't understand. I'm open. It just seems like the answer would be yes. What am I missing? I mean, even if you're a Warren supporter, what am I missing?
You also have to protect them as what they are. Do you think that a crime against somebody who is transgender should be punished as a hate crime in statute?
I think we could, if we think that's going to be the most effective way to make change.
I can't believe nobody pointed this out, like how horrible that is. I can't believe nobody said, wait a minute, that's a non-answer. If +1 equals -1, and I think we can, no shit, you can do stuff. I mean, that's the whole point of him asking you that. He's asking you, should this take place? And you're telling him, we could do that if we think that's the right answer. Yeah, I guess you can do anything if you think it's the right answer. That's a horrible answer. I can't believe anybody let that slide without ridicule.
So I'm open to this. But I'll tell you what I really want. I want to just
I'm open to this. I don't understand the open to this thing. That just seems weird to me. Like, and look, I guess my point is, if you agree with the premise of hate crime laws, which, again, I think she does, then how don't you, like, I don't understand how one fits and the other one doesn't. I don't get that at all. I'm open to this. Seems like a horrible answer. And yeah, nobody ever follows up. And to show you my point, this is Emma asking Elizabeth Warren about the military budget. Hey, you're a lefty. How do you deal with your lefty bona fides while also voting for this horrible military budget?
Progressive domestic policy. You also voted for a military budget increase in 2017. How does that square with your progressive politics when we're talking about foreign policy?
Great question, by the way. Great question. Listen to what happens. This question gets reframed into something that has nothing to do with Emma asked and makes what Emma asked that much more pertinent, meaning Emma should follow this up immediately. And I'll show you what I mean.
Question is, do I think we should cut the military budget? The answer is yes. And I'm now on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've had this fight over and over. But there's another part to it, too. We need to stop the control over our defense budget that's exercised by the giant defense industry. As you know, we now have a Secretary of Defense who spent 7 years as head lobbyist.
Now, just so we're clear, the question was, how do you square your progressive bona fides with voting for this bloated military budget? I have no idea what Elizabeth Warren is talking about, but she's effectively taking this into a la-la land. She's off somewhere else. If you're asking whether I think we should cut the military budget, no, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, why did you vote for a bloated military budget? Those are two different questions. Now, what Emma should ask immediately here is, wait a minute. You agree with me that the military budget is bloated and this is a corrupt process. So why did you vote for that bloated military budget that you agree with me is corrupt? And how do you square that with your progressive bona fides? Meaning, the question becomes more insistent based on Elizabeth Warren's answer, because Elizabeth Warren essentially just said, yeah, the military budget is bloated and corrupt. And Emma essentially was asking, well, why did you vote for it? She didn't follow that up with, well, why did you vote for it? And how do you square it with your progressive bona fides? No follow-up. Chris Hayes, listen to this one.
That you had amassed. What does that say about what you were doing before? If this is the right way to do it now, why now and why not before?
So look, I've never actually been in a deeply competitive primary. I get it. Republicans come to the table armed to the teeth. They've got all of their donors, their wealthy donors. They've got their super PACs. They've got their dark money. They got everything going for them. And I'm just going to be blunt. I do not believe in unilateral disarmament. We got to go into these fights, and we got to be willing to win these fights.
So this just applies to the primary. Like, were you to get the nomination, or anyone else to get the nomination, like, just raise all the money you can, however you can.
Yes, but here.
Now, again, yes, La La Land, somewhere different. And again, a situation where no follow-up. And her answer makes his question more insistent. This is the exact same thing with the Emma Vigila thing. And if I'm being honest, even with Cuomo, on these questions of the LGBT stuff, it's like her answer distracts the interviewer, but we're in the distraction, the question becomes more insistent. Hey, if you were raising all of this dark money and so forth, and you ran your Senate campaign, I mean, you raised all the money that you wanted to in that Senate campaign, you have a war chest of $11 million. Now, what he didn't put two and two together and say, well, wait a minute. Oh, wait, you said you weren't going to raise any money from this dark money stuff, but you did drop this into your presidential campaign. How do you square that? Separate issue. But on this, he asked her, if you were raising all of that money before and you're not doing it in the primary, why was it wrong back then? Now, his question is on point. You're now saying you're not going to take any money in the primary. All right, fair enough. Why? Well, you're saying that that money had certain entanglements associated with it. Fair enough. I agree with you. Then why was it okay to do it in your other Senate campaign? And what does that mean for you and the entanglements that was there in your Senate campaign? He's asking her a question about if it's wrong now, why wasn't it wrong back then? Great question. Sanders, for the most part, is grassroots through and through. He's running his Senate campaign that way. He ran his presidential campaign that way. Warren didn't. Why is it wrong now? What was wrong back then? Warren says, well, I'm not doing this going forward. But that's not really what he asked her. He asked her something completely different. And she says, I'm not going to do this going forward into the general. I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. You can raise all the money in the world. I am okay with that, and that's what I'm going to do. And Chris Hayes gets distracted by this, missing that that's not what he asked her. And what he should have said was, well, wait a minute. Why don't you raise money in the primary then? I mean, what's wrong with raising all of this money in the primary in the way that you're going to raise it in the general? What's the issue? I mean, you have no moral qualms with it, clearly. Why don't you do it in the primary? I mean, it seems like you could raise even more. You can have even more of a war chest. You can even build faster grassroots movement. What's the issue? He doesn't ask. He gets distracted by the pony that she's showing him about unilateral disarmament. And he just goes with it. Nobody ever asks a follow-up, and the follow-up is more insistent. Elizabeth Warren got one viral video at the LGBT forum, and there's controversy around this. So listen to this. This is a question that was asked about whether marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, here's the thing. Any presidential team that is not doing debate prep or prep for various questions, they're not doing their job. Is marriage between a man and a woman, and a person asking you that on the campaign trail should be one of the questions that just come up in your debate prep. That should be a question that, since you're going to a forum dealing with equality, that you would imagine may come up. And so at the very least, that should be something that you guys bring up in your debate prep. I don't necessarily have this thing that they were passing questions. At least, I mean, I don't think they're above it, but I don't think they need to on this question, because I think it's a question that any good campaign would just expect. But let's hear this. There's a controversy. Now explain why.
Thank you for being here. Let's say you're on the campaign trail and you're approached. You have been, yes. And a supporter approaches you and says, Senator, I am old-fashioned, and my faith teaches me that marriage is between one man and one woman. What is your response?
Well, I'm going to assume it's a guy who said that. And I'm going to say, then just marry one woman. I'm cool with that. Assuming you can find one.
Let me ask you a follow on that.
A follow-up. Joy kill. All right. What's your follow-up,
That's
Chris?
the job. That's the job.
Yeah, okay.
You grew up conservative in a conservative household. You were Republican by party for many years.
Yep.
Was there ever a time that you felt differently about this issue in particular, about same-sex marriage?
No, I don't think so. I actually don't remember it. I mean, it may have been the case. I don't have notes from when I was a little kid, but I don't. And that's part of it. I mean, to me, it's about what I learned in the church I grew up in. First song I ever remember singing is
She's talking about singing. That has nothing to do with the question. Here's the pony. Here's the pony. Here's the pony. And this was supposed to be a follow-up to one of the other questions. Now, this video went viral. That answer went viral. I mean, it didn't see... I mean, I guess it's a decent answer. I didn't think it was, a viral answer per se. But she said, just marry one man, one woman. Here's the catch. The guy who asked her that was a donor. He was a donor. So Fox News dug up, and CNN has a history of doing this. CNN will say, okay, here's this, guy from so-and-so. And then you look below the scenes and you find that the person has some relationship either to the party or some relationship that CNN hasn't necessarily disclosed. Well, Fox News apparently is on the job. So the man who asked the question was Morgan Cox. That's pretty homophobic. All right, I'm sorry, I'm being childish. Morgan Cox III, who sits on the board of directors for the Human Rights Campaign. HRC is an organization that is co-hosting CNN's LGBTQ Townhall on Thursday and happens to be one of the nation's foremost advocacy groups on the issue. The event was closed to the public and only included invited groups, stakeholders of the movement, and members of the civic organizations, according to the group. Donor data reveals that the man matching Cox's profile donated at least $5,400 to Warren in 2017 and 2018, and Morgan Cox III from Plano, Texas, gave $2,700 to Warren in July of 2017, $1,000 in April 2018, and another $1,700 in the same April. Wow, that was an aggressive donor. When Cox was introduced on Thursday, CNN described him as someone tied to quote-unquote real estate investment firm in Dallas, Texas. Both Cox's LinkedIn profile and HRC's Human Rights Campaign website say he's based in Plano, Texas. His LinkedIn profile also notes that he works as partner to the Marquee Group, a real estate firm based in Texas. So the question that goes viral is essentially a question asked to her by, you might not be able to call him a mega donor, but at the very least, a uber aggressive donor to Warren. And also part of an organization that hosted the CNN event. So just to be clear, question one, Warren can't remember when she was a child at the age of 35 to 40 as a Republican. And when asked, do you hold or did you hold any ideas as a Republican, she says, I don't remember when I was a kid. Cuomo doesn't follow up and say, well, wait a minute. You were a Republican up into your 40s. Are you saying that you didn't hold any of those ideas at that age? Elizabeth Warren deflects and goes into singing or something. Second, Elizabeth Warren is asked, are you open or do you want, should we put into statute protection for transgender community as a hate crime? Warren's answer is, I'm open to it. First, she goes into somewhat of a odd, I guess she's trying to sort her thoughts out, but eventually she says, I'm open to it. And I don't quite understand that answer. The moment that you carve out a space for hate crimes at all, it seems that the space will be carved out just by definition from the standpoint of a protected group. But Warren is just open to it. That answer doesn't quite make sense to me. And the answer that goes viral is essentially a planned answer for a question that she either assumed she was going to get, or at the very least, a benefit of the doubt. I would imagine she assumed she was going to get, and essentially gave a planned answer. It goes viral. I don't know why, but it does. Cuomo doesn't really do follow-up on any of this stuff, at least not in any real, tangible way. I'm amazed by this. But I shouldn't be surprised. Joe Biden said black people didn't know how to raise their kids, and everybody just kind of like, oh well, keep it moving. Keep it moving. Just keep it moving. Black folks can't raise their kids. Keep it moving. Just keep it moving. Yankatorno Udamouth. Can you talk about Tulsi in New York Times smear article? I saw that article. I have that on my Twitter feed. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I mean, they're essentially linking her to Assad or to Russia or something. It was pretty disgusting. I saw snapshots of the article. I haven't saw the entire article, but yeah, it's on my Twitter feed to review. Thanks, man. I appreciate the super chat. All right, this video's gone long. I hope I made my case. CNN sucks. And it seems that no one asked Warren follow-up. I don't quite understand why. God, I wish I was in these situations sometimes. Because some of that stuff just asks itself. I mean, I don't really care about the dog and pony stuff. I kind of care more so about the answer. And some of these questions were actually good. The question that Emma asked her was actually a really good question. It demanded a follow-up, seeing as Warren just said, yes, the military budget is corrupt. So wait, you voted for a corrupt military budget? That was not asked. Chris Hayes, again, asked a really good question. What was wrong with the way you were raising money then, if you're now saying it's problematic? And she says, I'm not taking it in the primary. He goes into La La Land. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why aren't you taking it in the primary? I mean, if you're trying to raise grassroots funding, I mean, you could do it better. I mean, you don't seem to have an issue with it if you're going to take it in the general. It makes no sense that you won't take it in the primary. Oh, they don't ask these questions. They don't ask these questions. I don't understand it. All right. Like, share, subscribe. I am solid. Really, Jamal, you don't? No, I'm not saying it like that. I know. I mean, they've been working hand in hand, essentially. Honestly, at this point, it seems outright with the Democratic Party. I don't know if that's just because they think Trump is an ogre, if they just want to get back to that old-time politics. I don't know what it is. But they have been, like, in the pocket in insane ways. I mean, MSNBC has always been the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. CNN has been, you know, in the age of Trump, everything just relates to Trump. And they like Warren. They like Warren. They've been outright flattery of her. Did you see Rand Paul on The View discussing Syria? I saw bits and pieces of the interview. I saw Rand Paul say something where people were laughing at him about the top 1%. But I also know Rand Paul backs Trump's decision on Syria. My issue, Trump's decision makes no sense. It just doesn't. If Trump is doing this and he's moving the troops out, then fair enough. Okay. If Trump is doing this and keeps the troops in Syria, then I'm like, well, if you're keeping the troops in Syria, then what does it matter whether you're keeping them in one part of Syria or in the other part of Syria to protect the quote unquote the Kurds? It doesn't make sense in the terms of like the flack that he's getting for it. My thing is bring the troops home. Bring the troops home. Work with Assad. Bring the troops home. And that's unsavory. People don't necessarily like saying that, but it's the weirdest thing in the world to me that Donald Trump is giving over Syrian land to Turkey. And the issue that the media is taking is not so much that, whoa, how is Donald Trump giving over somebody else's land to another country? Their issue is more so, we're betraying our allies. We're betraying our allies. It's astonishing. Syrian land. Why is it the United States' responsibility to prop up an autonomous region? This is not our territory. I'm enamored by that. But Trump is not bringing the troops out. And not just that, he's upping the level of troops that are going into Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's fucking ludicrous. And then he's screaming at the height of his lungs about, we're bringing the troops out. We're bringing the troops out. He is lying through his teeth. Outright lying through his teeth. If Trump was just leaving on board, and if Trump wants to say, all right, I'm going to fill the gap with Turkey and so forth, it is Syrian territory. How are you filling the gap with another country? I showed the video of Bashar al-Assad essentially making the point that the United States will betray you because there was no alternative. The United States was not going to stay in Syria forever. The United States at some point was going to leave. And whatever autonomous region you had, this notion of Rojava or the beginning of Kurdistan, whatever it is, the U.S. was not going to participate in propping that project up for year upon year upon year upon year. It's a tactical alliance. Trump went with a NATO country. He was always going to go with a NATO country. But nobody thinks it's weird that he's given over Syrian territory to a country that's not Syria. And it seems that if you wanted to protect your allies, the Kurds, who we now care so much about, and media has a camera to watch every dead Kurd, it looks like you work with the country, Bashar al-Assad. It's the weirdest thing in the world to me. I saw bits and pieces of it. I didn't see all of it. I saw him making the argument somewhere. But I know he's on board for this decision. My issue with this choice is more so, I want our troops brought home. And Trump's not doing that. Just saying. Like, share, subscribe. Think so.